have magazine bans.
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
The state of Florida, where we have freedom and the ability to carry whatever firearm we want.
And all those cases, he's going to list maybe hundreds more, they involve guns that are not banned by this.
Democrats to restrict Second Amendment rights, like requiring background checks for transfers of firearms.
Everytown USA, Mr. Wilcox has been working with our government to implement this to target Second Amendment.
In the filibuster, expand the court, take away your constitutional rights under the Second Amendment. Well, we just heard that that's exactly what the Democrats want. Here's a 12-round magazine. This magazine would be banned under this current bill. It doesn't fit.
Range versus Garland. The news that the U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to review the case of Range versus Garland is nothing short of a watershed moment in the realm of Second Amendment jurisprudence. While it may not make headlines on the same scale as a blockbuster movie release or a celebrity scandal, it's a development that carries profound implications for the fundamental rights of Americans and the ever-evolving interpretation of the Second Amendment. At the heart of this case lies a crucial question. Can the federal government ban non-violent felons from possessing firearms without violating their Second Amendment rights? The answer may seem straightforward, but it's a question that has divided legal minds and led to a series of complex legal battles. Range versus Garland revolves around an individual named Brian Range, whose life took an unexpected turn due to a misdemeanor conviction. In an effort to secure food stamps for his family, Range made a false statement regarding his income, resulting in a Class 1 misdemeanor conviction in the state of Pennsylvania.
And all those cases, he's going to list maybe hundreds more, they involve guns that are not banned by this.
And said he supports a ban on the sale of assault weapons, which there's no such thing, and high-capacity magazines.
It's vital to note that Range's criminal record did not extend beyond this single non-violent misdemeanor, yet it was this conviction that led to a lifelong ban on his ability to own, possess, or acquire firearms. This case brings to light the contentious debate over who should be considered the people within the context of the Second Amendment. The government has argued that Range's non-violent conviction placed him outside the scope of individuals protected by the Second Amendment. However, the Third Circuit, after an en banc review, concluded otherwise. They found that Range's conviction should not automatically strip him of his Second Amendment rights, highlighting that his request to possess a rifle for hunting and a shotgun for self-defense is aligned with the Constitution's protection of these rights. The U.S. Supreme Court's decision to review Range versus Garland suggests that the highest judicial body in the land recognizes the need to provide clarity and establish a precedent in this area of law. The implications of their ruling extend beyond Range's individual case. It has the potential to set a precedent that affects the rights of countless non-violent felons who, like Range, have had their ability to bear arms curtailed based on past convictions that may not necessarily pose a threat to public safety. As the U.S. Supreme Court delves into the intricacies of Range versus Garland, it holds the power to shape the future of Second Amendment jurisprudence in the U.S. The decision they reach will have a profound and lasting impact on the rights of American citizens, particularly those who have committed nonviolent offenses and are seeking to reclaim their Second Amendment privileges. It's a decision that will shape the balance between maintaining public safety and preserving personal liberties, and one that carries the potential to reshape the Second Amendment landscape forever. Challenging federal firearm laws. The Range versus Garland case stands as a significant challenge to federal firearm laws, particularly those that prohibit nonviolent felons from possessing firearms. This legal battle brings to the forefront a fundamental question that strikes at the heart of the Second Amendment. Should individuals convicted of nonviolent felonies be denied their right to bear arms? The core of this case is Brian Range's conviction for a nonviolent misdemeanor, in which he made a false statement about his income to secure food stamps for his family. It's essential to emphasize that Range's criminal history begins and ends with this single misdemeanor conviction. However, the consequence was severe. The question at hand is whether the federal government's prohibition of nonviolent felons from gun ownership infringes upon their Second Amendment rights. The government's stance is clear. They argue that Range's nonviolent conviction justifiably excludes him from the category of individuals protected by the Second Amendment.
Democrats to restrict Second Amendment rights, like requiring background checks for transfers of firearms.
And their intentions are clear. They want to take away law-abiding citizens' ability to purchase the firearm of their choice.
This argument essentially asserts that the government's interest in preventing firearm possession by those with any felony record, violent or nonviolent, supersedes the individual's right to bear arms. On the other side of the courtroom, Range and his legal team argue that his misdemeanor should not be an automatic disqualifier for Second Amendment protections. They contend that the federal law imposing this lifetime firearms ban based on a single nonviolent misdemeanor conviction is overly restrictive and infringes upon his constitutional rights. Furthermore, this case challenges the precedent set by the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which had previously utilized what's known as the two-step approach in evaluating Second Amendment cases. In light of a recent Supreme Court decision, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin, this approach has come under scrutiny. The Supreme Court ruled that it's an improper method to evaluate Second Amendment cases, which adds another layer of complexity to the legal arguments in Range v. Garland. Ultimately, the Range v. Garland case serves as a litmus test for how the U.S. legal system balances public safety and individual liberties. The outcome could have far-reaching implications, not only for Brian Range, but also for countless individuals who find themselves in a similar situation, nonviolent felons who wish to have their Second Amendment rights restored. Background of the Second Amendment Challenge. To understand the Range v. Garland Second Amendment Challenge, it's crucial to delve into the background, uncovering the origins of the case, the circumstances surrounding Brian Range's conviction, and the specific federal laws under scrutiny. The story begins with Brian Range, an individual whose life took an unexpected turn due to a nonviolent misdemeanor conviction. This seemingly minor infraction resulted in his conviction for a Class 1 misdemeanor in the state of Pennsylvania. It's worth highlighting the nature of this conviction. It was a nonviolent offense and involved a false statement related to income for food stamps. Range's criminal record did not extend beyond this single misdemeanor, and he had no other serious criminal issues. However, the ramifications of his conviction extended far beyond the courtroom. Under federal law, specifically 18 U.S.C. 922G1, individuals convicted of a felony are prohibited from owning, possessing, or acquiring firearms. In the case of Range, his single nonviolent misdemeanor was deemed sufficient to categorize him as a felon under this law, leading to a lifelong ban on his ability to exercise his Second Amendment right to bear arms. The federal law at the center of this controversy is a key component of the larger framework of federal firearms regulations. It plays a critical role in determining who is eligible to own and possess firearms, with particular emphasis on individuals with felony convictions. This law serves as the linchpin of the government's argument against Range's challenge to its constitutionality.
Everytown USA, Mr. Wilcox has been working with our government to implement this to target Second Amendment.
Have magazine bans.
Would the gentleman
and
yield
compare
for
them to
question?
the state of Florida, where we have freedom and the ability to carry whatever firearm we want. In the filibuster, expand the court, take away your constitutional rights under the Second Amendment. Well, we just heard that that's exactly what the Democrats want.
The heart of Range's challenge is whether such a severe or permanent restriction on Second Amendment rights is justifiable based on a single nonviolent misdemeanor conviction. This case explores the intersection of federal firearms laws, individual rights, and the interpretation of the Second Amendment's protections. As we journey deeper into the Range v. Garland case, it becomes apparent that the circumstances surrounding Brian Range's conviction for concealing income for food stamps have led to a fundamental legal challenge. It challenges the federal laws that ban nonviolent felons from possessing firearms. The case's background offers valuable insights into the complexity of the legal issues at hand and the potential ramifications of its outcome for countless individuals in similar situations. From misdemeanor to firearms ban. Brian Range's legal journey is a poignant narrative that takes us from a seemingly minor nonviolent misdemeanor conviction to the severe and far-reaching consequence of a lifelong ban on firearm ownership. It sheds light on the human aspect of the Range v. Garland case, highlighting the real-life implications of complex legal issues. In this attempt to provide for his loved ones, he made a false statement about his income. This misstep resulted in a Class 1 misdemeanor conviction
Where you guys worked with the ATF to change something that had been the law for 10 years.
Here's a gun I carry every single day to protect myself, my family, my wife, my home.
in the state of Pennsylvania, an offense that, under the prevailing federal law, would forever alter his life. It's essential to emphasize the nature of this conviction. It was nonviolent and pertained to a single act of concealing income for food stamps. There were no violent crimes in Range's history, and he had no other serious criminal issues. In any other context, it might have been viewed as a minor infraction with consequences commensurate with the offense. His journey included not just legal battles, but also a struggle to regain his fundamental rights and the ability to protect himself and his family. The case is a testament to the broader implications of seemingly minor legal issues. It underscores the complex interplay between the legal system and the lives of ordinary citizens. Third Circuit's two-step approach. The Third Circuit Court's two-step approach to evaluating Second Amendment cases is a critical element of the legal landscape in the Range v. Garland case. This method, which was previously employed by the court, carries significant implications for the case's arguments and potential outcomes. The two-step approach is a systematic method for assisting Second Amendment challenges, and it involves two key stages. Here's how it works. Step 1. In the first step, the court examines whether the challenged law or regulation impacts conduct that is protected by the Second Amendment. This stage involves determining whether the individual's claim falls within the scope of the Second Amendment's protection. If the law in question does not affect conduct protected by the Second Amendment, the inquiry ends here. Step 2. If the court finds that the law does implicate Second Amendment protected conduct, it proceeds to the second step. In this stage, the court evaluates the law's constitutionality by applying the appropriate level of scrutiny. Depending on the circuit and its precedent, the court may use either strict scrutiny or intermediate scrutiny.
The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Here's a 12-round magazine. This magazine would be banned under this current bill. It doesn't fit.
But this could potentially impact millions of Americans, law-abiding Second Amendment supporting Americans.
Strict scrutiny involves a rigorous assessment, while intermediate scrutiny is less stringent. Yet the implications of the two-step approach extend beyond Range's specific circumstances. The approach's application can shape how future Second Amendment cases are evaluated within this circuit. It dictates the level of scrutiny applied to each case, which in turn influences the burden of proof for the plaintiffs. The Range v. Garland case underscores the complexities of interpreting the Second Amendment, as different circuits may adopt varying approaches and standards for assessment. It's a reminder that the legal journey is not just about individual cases, it's about setting precedents that guide future decisions. As the case unfolds, the implications of the Third Circuit's two-step approach remain central to the legal arguments, underscoring the profound and lasting impact of this framework on Second Amendment jurisprudence in the United States. En banc review. The en banc review process in the Range v. Garland case marked a pivotal turning point in the legal journey, ultimately leading to a significant redefinition of Second Amendment rights, particularly concerning nonviolent felons. This review process has a profound impact, reshaping the legal landscape and introducing a new interpretation of constitutional rights.
Yeah, this really comes down to the letter of the law, and who you trust depends on your interpretation of it.
SB 2 was California's answer to the Bruin decision because just like New York,
And in the House in this coming week on Monday.
but let's just say that you actually did get a permit under the original SB 2.
Now today, as you all know as well, we're also marking National Gun Violence Awareness Day.
An en banc review, for context, involves a reconsideration of a case by all the judges on a particular circuit court, as opposed to the standard three-judge panel. This process is typically reserved for complex or controversial cases. In the context of the Range v. Garland case, it was a crucial step in refining the interpretation of Second Amendment rights. The en banc review was prompted by a three-judge panel of the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which had initially upheld the federal law banning nonviolent felons from owning firearms. They had based their decision on the previous application of the two-step approach, a method that had become contentious after the Supreme Court's decision in the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin case, which ruled against its use in evaluating Second Amendment cases. The en banc review process led to a dramatic shift in interpretation. The majority opinion, rendered by the full panel of judges, declared that the application of the federal law to Bryan Range in this case was unconstitutional. The decision broke new ground by asserting that Range, despite his nonviolent felony, was among the people protected by the Second Amendment. The legal reasoning behind this redefinition was multifaceted. It contended that the two-step approach previously employed by the court had been invalidated by the Supreme Court's decision in Bruin, which rejected its use. This emphasized the need to reevaluate the application of the law in Range's case. Furthermore, the en banc review emphasized that Range's appeal necessitated an examination of who qualifies as the people under the Second Amendment. It maintained that Range, despite his 1995 false statement conviction, was still among the people entitled to bear arms. This perspective acknowledged the absence of a historical tradition of disarming individuals like Range, thereby challenging the government's contention that he fell outside the scope of the Second Amendment's protection.
We are taking action. We are getting things done, and we are trying to save lives.
Today, Vice President Harris will also deliver remarks at John Lewis High School, where she will talk about
So while everybody's distracted with New Mexico's ban on open and concealed carry,
and call on young people to continue leading efforts to end gun violence,
Tearing apart families and making our streets less safe.
For the Biden administration about these issues we are discussing today prior.
The impact of this en banc review cannot be overstated. It dramatically altered the legal terrain for Second Amendment cases, specifically in the context of nonviolent felons. The decision refocused the attention on individual rights and the need for a nuanced evaluation of each case, rather than a blanket application of the federal law. The Range v. Garland en banc review showcases the adaptability of the U.S. legal system in response to evolving legal interpretations and constitutional principles. It has set a precedent that reframes how Second Amendment rights are evaluated, emphasizing the importance of considering the unique circumstances of each case. Government strategy. The government's legal strategy in the Range v. Garland case is a calculated and strategic maneuver that carries substantial implications for the course of this case and its potential ramifications for Second Amendment rights. Central to this strategy is the government's decision to seek Supreme Court review and its connection to another case, the Rahimi case. Seeking Supreme Court review. The decision to seek Supreme Court review is a strategic move that underscores the significance of the Range v. Garland case. By petitioning the U.S. Supreme Court, the government is seeking the highest level of judicial scrutiny and intervention. This indicates their awareness of the importance of the case and the desire to secure a decision that aligns with their legal stance. Relating Range to Rahimi. The government's strategy involves drawing a connection between the Range case and another case, Rahimi, which deals with a different section of federal law. The Rahimi case concerns the federal law that prohibits individuals subject to domestic violence restraining orders from purchasing or possessing firearms. While the specifics of the two cases differ, the government is using this connection strategically to its advantage. The reasoning behind this approach can be broken down as follows. Minimizing risk. The government likely views the Rahimi case as more favorable to its position than the Range case. By seeking Supreme Court review in Range and requesting that the court hold the Range case until a decision is reached in Rahimi, they aim to mitigate the risk of an unfavorable decision in Range affecting the Rahimi case. Maintaining control. By tying the Range and Rahimi cases together, the government can attempt to control the narrative and the legal arguments presented to the Supreme Court. They prefer to isolate the review of who qualifies as the people in the Second Amendment to the Rahimi case, which they may view as more favorable terrain. Avoiding precedent. A decision in Range v. Garland could potentially establish a precedent that extends beyond this specific case. The government's strategy aims to prevent this from happening in the event that the Supreme Court rules in favor of Brian Range. This is part of their effort to safeguard the government's interests and existing legal framework. In essence, the government's strategy is about risk management and positioning themselves for a favorable outcome. By connecting the Range case to Rahimi and requesting that the court hold Range until Rahimi is decided, they are working to ensure that the legal landscape that emerges from these cases aligns more closely with their legal arguments and interpretation of federal law. Who qualifies as the people? The debate over who qualifies as the people in the Second Amendment is a central and enduring issue that lies at the heart of many Second Amendment cases, including Range v. Garland. It represents a critical point of contention in the interpretation of one of the most debated and cherished amendments in the U.S. Constitution. The Second Amendment reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." The two pivotal words here are the people. These two words are at the center of a passionate and long-standing debate in legal and constitutional circles. On one side of the debate, there's the interpretation that the people refers to an individual right held by all American citizens, regardless of any past convictions. This view argues that the Second Amendment bestows an unequivocal right to bear arms, emphasizing the phrase, the right of the people.
I think worse than that, sir. You will see millions of otherwise law-abiding citizens.
That had you prove some type of special need in order to get a permit.
The co-chair of the Second Amendment caucus, Mr. Massey.
This is a national thing that can affect millions of Americans.
This interpretation insists that nonviolent felons or those with misdemeanors should not be deprived of their Second Amendment rights, and that the term the people should be all-encompassing. On the opposing side, there's the interpretation that the people is not universal and should not extend to individuals with felony convictions, particularly those convicted of violent crimes. This view emphasizes the phrase, a well-regulated militia, asserting that the right to bear arms is connected to service in a militia and not an unrestricted individual right. It contends that convicted felons, whether violent or nonviolent, should be excluded from this constitutional protection. In the context of the Range versus Garland case, the debate over who qualifies as the people is front and center. Brian Range's challenge to the federal law banning nonviolent felons from owning firearms hinges on his assertion that he still qualifies as the people entitled to Second Amendment protections despite his single nonviolent misdemeanor conviction. The court's ultimate decision in this case will undoubtedly have broader implications for the ongoing debate over this term's interpretation. The Range versus Garland case is a microcosm of a much larger legal and ideological battle.
Shall not be infringed.
Take all of the guns from all of the people. That's their goal.
Because Bruin said that that's unconstitutional, so they drafted SB 2, which was originally introduced back in December.
Contrast that with what Republicans did to address gun violence and crime the last time they were in charge.
And there's been quite a few amendments. Well, the last thing to happen just happened yesterday.
Of any semi-automatic assault weapon that was lawfully possessed before the bill became law.
One that underscores the complex relationship between individual rights and public safety. It represents the struggle to strike a balance between personal liberties and societal well-being in an ever-evolving society. Implications for the future. The Supreme Court's forthcoming decision in the Range versus Garland case carries significant implications for Second Amendment rights and felon disarmament laws in the United States. The central issue in Range versus Garland revolves around the interpretation of the term the people in the Second Amendment. Brian Range, a nonviolent felon, challenges the federal law that permanently bans individuals with nonviolent felony convictions from owning firearms. This case has broader implications for countless individuals with similar convictions.
And we reached the owner of Rare Breed by phone. They said they're resubmitting evidence.
It is reported from the Rules Committee. Against any resolution reported,
There's a hearing that you can't be at, your counsel can't be present, you haven't been charged with the crime.
There are many areas, as you might imagine, especially when you're dealing with firearms, where we just don't know.
The potential outcomes of this case are critical. A Supreme Court decision could provide clarity on the Second Amendment rights of nonviolent felons. It may establish whether individuals with nonviolent felony convictions can have their gun ownership rights restored, or if they remain permanently barred from firearm possession. The decision in Range versus Garland could set a precedent for similar cases in the future. If the court rules in favor of Brian Range, it might open the door for others with nonviolent felony convictions to seek the restoration of their gun ownership rights. Conversely, a decision against Range could solidify the restrictions on Second Amendment rights for nonviolent felons. The broader implications are significant. This case could reignite the national debate on gun control and the delicate balance between individual rights and public safety. Second Amendment rights have long been a contentious issue in the U.S., and this case may reignite this debate. Additionally, the case may influence the interpretation of the Second Amendment in different jurisdictions. While it addresses federal law,
They don't care about that fundamental liberty law-abiding citizens in this country enjoy.
California knows how to do these things well, and they know how to work around things so that they can just draft this new law.
Let's see what is the most compelling thing to learn from that case. How many times was this gentleman?
If you did, you still couldn't use it because you couldn't go about your daily life without crossing through some type of sensitive location.
We filed formal petitions for rulemaking through the appropriate channels.
I think worse than that, sir, you will see millions of otherwise law-abiding citizens.
State laws regarding gun ownership and nonviolent felons could be affected by the Supreme Court's ruling. This could lead to legal challenges and changes in various states' approaches to felon disarmament laws. That's all for this video, folks. We'll see you next time.